All right, as we speak, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is in the air with 3 released American hostages who are on their way back, thankfully, to the United States after spending months inside hard labor prison camps across North Korea. Now, this was a major diplomatic win for the president and the Trump administration, and a very important step forward for North Korea. And most importantly, 3 American lives, thankfully, were saved. Now, President Trump's historic summit with Kim Jong-un is now moving forward as planned. Take a look.
I appreciate Kim Jong-un doing this and allowing them to go. We've picked a time, we've picked a place for the meeting, or summit, as you like to call it. And I think it'll be very successful. But as I always say, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But it's going to be a very important event. Again, I think this is something that nobody thought was going to happen for years or more.
Where's the summit going to take place?
We're going to announce that in 3 days, Joe. Within 3 days.
Within 3 days?
We're just working arrangements. But
will it be the DMZ?
It will not be there. No.
Do you deserve the Nobel Prize, do you think?
Everyone thinks so, but I would never say it. You know what I want to do? I want to get it finished. The prize I want is victory for the world, not for even here. I want victory for the world, because that's what we're talking about. So that's the only prize I want.
A date has now been set for this upcoming meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un, and we'll let you know all the details as we get them. Let me be clear. This diplomatic progress, it is no accident. When President Trump took the reins from Barack Obama, while a little rocket man was launching his ballistic missiles over Japan, he was threatening Guam, threatening the rest of the world, and, of course, testing nuclear weapons left and right, and, of course, ballistic missiles. Now, all of these aggressive tactics have ended, at least for the moment. This thanks to the hard work, the negotiating skills of the president and his brand new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Now, after tightening sanctions, developing a strong relationship with the president of China, and threatening to introduce new tariffs, sending multiple carrier strike groups to the region, and berating Kim Jong-un on the world stage, the North Korean dictator is now limping to the negotiating table, and it's on the terms of the United States. But wait, hang on. Remember, just a few months ago, your media, your corrupt, destroy Trump media, was telling you that Donald Trump was leading us to a nuclear war with North Korea. Oh, how could they ever get something like that wrong? Typical. Take a look.
The idea of a nuclear showdown with North Korea keeps you up at night? I would recommend deleting your Twitter app.
He is not merely being cavalier with a threat about nuclear war. He's being cavalier in a way that makes him seem demented.
These are the messages from a person who is not well, from a leader who is not fit for office.
President Trump is goading Kim Jong-un to test a nuclear missile again, to prove its reliability, to show him wrong. And fundamentally, I think it comes across as 2 kindergarteners who are jostling each other, except that each has nuclear weapons.
Well, here's what...
Too late after 100,000 Americans die.
After a nuclear holocaust.
Or after 1 million die in Seattle.
And that's where we are. This is not an exaggeration.
Trump's comments about nuclear weapons have experts worried he could literally inadvertently trigger a catastrophe.
Yeah, that typical media barrage didn't end well or age well. So I wonder if the mainstream media, are they going to apologize for their hysterical coverage, just like their phony Russian coverage, just like everything else they get wrong? Now, it's unlikely, because just yesterday, yes, the New York Times, the paper of record, they actually slammed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because he was absent during President Trump's Iran nuclear deal announcement. Well, then they found out he was actually in North Korea, rescuing and saving American hostages, something Barack Obama could never get done. Now, Trump responded just 2 hours ago on Twitter. He wrote, the failing New York Times criticized the Secretary of State, Pompeo, for being AWOL, missing, when in fact he was flying to North Korea. Fake news so bad. Now, we're going to get back to the abusively biased media in just a moment. But first, we are also following very closely a developing situation inside of Iran. The IDF is reporting that Israel's Iron Dome was able to intercept multiple rockets that were fired by Iranian sources from a Syrian base. No injuries have been reported. I just got off the phone with a high-ranking Israeli official who has now confirmed to me that this was in response to Israel's military actions. And in fact, I have confirmation Israel tonight, not long ago, has retaliated We're going to have more on that in a moment with Colonel Oliver North. But first, yesterday, President Trump made the important decision to pull America out of that incredibly flawed Iranian nuclear deal. Now, in a few weeks, U.S. sanctions against Iran will be reinstated, likely squeezing this rogue nation economically. And essentially, Iran will now have less money to fund, their proxy wars in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, their funding of terrorism around the world, their weapon systems that are aimed at Israel and other allies in the region. And, of course, the corrupt Islamist political leaders in Iran and the mullahs, they're not taking this so well. You had petulant Iranian lawmakers yelling, once again, death to America from the parliament floor, and even burning an American flag, as you can see. In other words, a pretty normal Tuesday from the parliament in Tehran. Now, meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader went on a totally unhinged Twitter rant saying the U.S. president's shallow, ludicrous behavior wasn't unexpected. The same behavior existed in previous U.S. presidents, yet the Iranian nation is persistent while former U.S. presidents passed away and the Islamic Republic of Iran is still standing. This man's corpse will also be worm food while the Islamic Republic stands strong. This is coming from a man, President Obama. Think about this. Trusted and handed over $150 billion to. And a promise he got back, well, we're not going to build nukes, but he got to continue to spin those centrifuges. Now, naturally, the mullahs of Iran are also threatening to ramp up their uranium enrichment program. President Trump is not bowing down to these empty threats. Let's take a look.
What are you going to do if Iran starts up their nuclear program again?
Iran will find out. They're going to find out. I don't think they should do that. I would advise Iran not to start their nuclear program. I would advise them very strongly. If they do, there will be very severe consequence. Okay?
Now, sadly, Iran's morally corrupt political leaders aren't the only ones melting down over the president's decision. Yeah, your very own mainstream media, they are also in freak-out mode yet again. I guess they didn't learn from their North Korean coverage. Take a look.
A decision by the president that some say marks the United States' biggest self-inflicted foreign policy wound since the Iraq War.
What we heard was not foreign policy, it was vandalism.
Doesn't this give Iran a propaganda win?
Of course.
I guess the good news here is that John Bolton is finally getting the war he's always wanted.
It reinforces the notion that we are something of a rogue country, that we don't honor or live up to our international commitments.
Is he just keeping a campaign promise here? Do we know what he pulled out of? Does he know what he pulled out?
The totality of this president's behavior and decisions does lead me to question why he does anything and whether or not it's to deflect from something else. I don't think he has the moral compass to make a decision based on our own national security.
It's almost like I can't believe anything he does because it seems to be based on a personal antagonism to Obama and a jealousy.
Every night now we get more and more evidence. Journalism in this country is dead and buried. I told you in 2007 and 8. Now this brand new Iran hysteria is only the latest example proving our point. Now let's turn to some important news. Now the president's pick to head the CIA, Gina Haspel. She testified powerfully today before the Senate Intelligence Committee as her confirmation process is now underway. As I have said many times on this program, that woman, Ms. Haspel, is an American patriot and hero. Her work in the CIA after 9/11 saved countless of American lives. It brought terrorists to justice. Still, you have some Democrats attacking Haspel for supporting legal programs that they claim now were too tough on jihadists, on terrorists, forcing Haspel to defend her incredible track record. Take a look at this outrage.
I would really like to have on the record whether you ever called for the program to be continued, which it sure sounds to me like your answer suggested. You said, well, we were doing our job. It ought to be continued. That troubles me very much.
Let me say this about myself. After 9/11, I didn't look to go sit on the Swiss desk. I stepped up. I was not on the sidelines. I was on the front lines in the Cold War, and I was on the front lines in the fight against Al-Qaeda.
Very simple. You have an operations officer who is captured. He's being waterboarded. I've asked you very simply, would you determine that to be immoral and something that should never be done, condoned in any way, shape, or form? Your response seems to be that civilized nations don't do it, but uncivilized nations do it, or uncivilized groups do it.
The United States does it.
A civilized nation was doing it until it was outlawed by this Congress.
Senator, I would never obviously support inhumane treatment of any CIA officers. We've lost CIA officers over the years to terrorists. I just gave an example. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed personally killed a Wall Street Journal correspondent and filmed that. I don't think there's any comparison between CIA officers serving their country, adhering to U.S. law, and terrorists who, by their very definition, are not following anybody's law.
And people need to look at that beheading. And by the way, only 3 people, including that man, were actually waterboarded under intense medical supervision. The New York Times reported last night that 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, asked a military judge to share information with the Intel Committee prior to Haspel's confirmation hearings. Really? We're going to let that guy give information? It is unbelievable, despicable, it's disgusting. 9/11-2001, we lost 3,000 Americans. Now, today, Senate Democrats slammed the CIA's interrogation tactics against KSM, but Haspel provided very important context about this terrorist. I hope people remember. Take a look.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the architect and mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. His nephew, Ramzi Youssef, was behind the 93 attack on the World Trade Center, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed financed that operation. He also was behind the infamous Bojinka plot in the Philippines. Tragically, he was the individual who personally killed a Wall Street Journal American correspondent and filmed that heinous act. He also, after 9/11, carried out an attack on a synagogue in Tunisia, and he had other attacks planned. We were able to warn allies about a planned attack, for example, on Heathrow Airport.
You want to see the most evil, despicable act besides 9/11? Go video the beheading of that reporter of which she's referring to. Now, remember, former top CIA official Jose Rodriguez, he's been on this program many times, and back in 2014, he reminded us that the interrogation program against KSM, one of 3 people waterboarded, it actually led our intelligence officials to the career of Osama bin Laden, which led us to Osama bin Laden. Take a look. So, in other words, you're saying that the accusation that these enhanced interrogation techniques were used beyond what had already been disclosed, you're saying is false, number one, and that in spite of their suggestion that they were not successful, you're saying that in fact that's not true. You were there. It was successful.
It was very successful, and for those of us who were there, it is just amazing that they could have come to this conclusion. Those of us who read the intelligence coming out of our black sites every morning and who acted on that intelligence know the value, and basically it led to the destruction of the organization.
It was successful. They were there. Jose Rodriguez, Gina Haspel, thank you for your service to your country. And America now needs you more than ever. It's high time for the U.S. Senate and these guys on their high horse after the fact to confirm your nomination. Finally tonight, more evidence that the deep state is crumbling. It has been 1 year since President Trump fired James Comey, on the recommendation in part of Rod Rosenstein, and it looks like he's longing for his days as America's top deep state arbiter. Now, Comey tweeted out a picture of himself, well, naturally, along with the caption, "Missing the people of the FBI today." Well, many that I talk to aren't missing him. Thank you for your commitment to the truth and for all you do for the good of the country, etc. Of course, Comey was fired for his less than truthful handling of the Clinton investigation, like when he lied about not writing the exoneration in May before interviewing Hillary Clinton in July and 17 other key people, or when he turned the other way as Clinton destroyed evidence, bleach bit, acid wash, deleting subpoenaed emails. And let's not forget, by the way, about Comey's FISA abuse, using Hillary's bought and paid for dirty dossier full of lies put together by a foreign national to lie to a FISA court judge to spy on a Trump campaign associate. And we could go on, but you've heard it before. We don't have all night. Instead, we do have some good news to bring you tonight from the ongoing obstruction in the Department of Justice. Fox News is reporting that the House chairman of the House Intel Committee, Chairman Nunes and Chairman Gowdy, they have now been invited by the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, to the DOJ for a briefing about the latest requests from Chairman Nunes regarding the Russia investigation. This, of course, came after a call between the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the Justice Department and their officials. Unfortunately, this briefing will be, of course, classified, but maybe, finally, after subpoena, after subpoena, after redaction, after slow walking, maybe the sign that the DOJ cooperation could be improving. I guess the threat of contempt of Congress, well, maybe that had an impact, too. They have been slow walking thousands of subpoenaed documents of Congress. They have been putting in heavily redacted comments. They've been claiming national security is at risk when, in fact, it's been proven at times not to be at risk. We asked the question on this program. Rod Rosenstein, what does the Department of Justice have to hide? All right. Now, according to a release from the State Department, that would be Mike Pompeo's State Department, the three freed hostages have issued a statement writing, quote, "We would like to express our deep appreciation to the United States government, to President Trump, to Secretary Pompeo, and the people of the United States for bringing us home. We thank God and all our families and friends who prayed for us and for our return. God bless America, the greatest nation in the world." Can't wait for them to land. Joining us now with reaction to all the big developments today, former Deputy Assistant to the President, Fox News National Security Strategist, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, retired CIA intelligence officer. We welcome him to the Fox family. Of course, he's been on a lot. Our friend Daniel Hoffman. Dr. Gorka, let me start with you. These hostages are freed. It took a military presence. It took the president taunting Kim Jong-un. It took sanctions, but it worked. And I don't believe the president brought in $150 billion in cash and other currencies and cargo planes to make this happen.
Isn't it a great night to be an American, Sean? This is stunning. The president and Secretary Pompeo, with this one act, have done more for America than Obama and his whole cabinet did in 8 years. No more appeasement. No more middle-of-the-night pallets of currency being shipped to our enemies. What did we pay for these three Americans to come home, Sean? Nothing. We dealt with a dictator as you should deal with all dictators. No appeasement. Walk softly and carry a very big stick or an aircraft carrier battle group. That's how you get things done. It is, a new day for America. And this is a message for all dictatorships. And this is the model for how we deal with Iran. We've shown Iran no more appeasement, and I'm telling the president and everybody in his circle, we use the Pyongyang model that Pompeo has effectively deployed to deal with regimes like Iran, Sean.
I've known Mike Pompeo a long time. I'm very proud of what he did. I'm very proud of what the president did here. Daniel Hoffman, I think you rightly have been telling people manage your expectations. I know we're talking about something that is massive, and that would be the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So important. But also, we never thought a year ago that Kim Jong-un would cross the DMZ into the arms of the president of South Korea. We never thought he would agree to have such talks. And we would no longer see missiles flying over Japan, Guam threatened, or talks about firing missiles that could reach New York and Boston. Yes, we should manage our expectations, trust and verify, peace through strength, but there's certainly far more hope than we have had in a long time.
Right, and this was a very tangible and positive result of this administration's foreign policy, Sean. And while we celebrate this diplomatic and humanitarian success, we need to remember as well that there are reportedly about 150 to 200,000 political prisoners in North Korea. This is like akin to the Soviet gulag. And while our three soon-to-be former hostages, after they receive the medical care I'm sure they'll need, I think they'll be very valuable sources of information on these North Korean prison labor camps and the awful, horrendous conditions to which innocent people are subjected. And it's important for us to call out North Korea on their horrific behavior towards their own population and towards our citizens as well.
You know, I want to go Israel tonight, earlier today, a couple of hours ago, multiple missiles fired by Iran from Syria. No Israeli has been hurt. I talked to high-level government sources. Colonel North has his sources in the IDF, thank God. But Israel has struck back tonight. From my intelligence sources, they went directly to where those missiles were fired. This, of course, was in retaliation to Israel effectively taking out a lot of these sites that they have been using in Syria. Dr. Gorka.
Yes, so the wonderful thing about the nation of Israel is that they have capabilities in the region that are unmatched. And when they feel a threat and when they have the requisite intelligence, they take action. The massive change for Israel now is that now they have us to stand with them shoulder to shoulder. As the vice president said on the anniversary of the 69th year of the founding of the State of Israel, I was in the room with the vice president. He says, we stand with Israel. Israel's enemies are our enemies.
And in a week, look what's this weekend, look what's going to happen, Daniel Hoffman. Jerusalem, now the capital. So many people promised, it happened. President Trump, another promise kept.
Extraordinary sea change, Sean, absolutely. But I think this is a precursor for more kinetic action in Syria. Iran is using that territory against Israel, and I fear that it may only get worse.
It may, and I don't know if I'd take on the Israeli Defense Forces, nor do I think you take on Israel's best ally, the United States. Thank you both.
Oh, the non-Fox media is all abuzz with the latest so-called bombshell from Michael Avenatti, an attorney for porn star Stormy Daniels. Now, he's claiming that a company controlled by a Russian billionaire paid the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, $500,000, which Cohen could have used then to pay Stormy Daniels. Okay, let's slow down here. First, consider the source. Avenatti, among other mistruths, claimed just last week that he knew for a fact that the FBI had wiretapped Cohen.
I don't think we're going to find out that this was confined just to email or voice wiretaps. I think they also, my understanding is that they were also wiretapping text message communications for the weeks leading up to the FBI raids.
Is that a piece of information you've come into in the course of your work on this case, or are you speculating?
No, I'm not speculating. That's a fact.
Well, as we know now, it wasn't a fact. There was no text message surveillance. That didn't happen. And now we have word that Avenatti committed a major blunder with his so-called scoop yesterday. Now, the Daily Caller is reporting that his 7-page, so he has a 7-page dossier with a list of payments supposedly made to Trump's lawyer, and it cites the wrong Michael Cohen. It's a fairly well-known name, Michael Cohen. A lot of Michael Cohens in the United States. The Caller is reporting that 2 of the allegedly fraudulent payments were made to men named Michael Cohen who have no affiliation with Trump. Oops. On top of all that, the Washington Post reports that the Treasury Department's Inspector General is investigating just how Avenatti obtained Cohen's banking records. For more, let's consult with Fox News contributor Byron York and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Robert Driscoll. Gentlemen, great to see you. Byron, there have been quite a few mistruths stated by Michael Avenatti, who is brought on to some of these other networks as almost like an analyst. They almost forget that he's representing a client, and instead he says something, and then the Chiron, Trump, Cohen, bombshell, Russian oligarch, without almost looking into the details themselves. It's wild.
He's actually been bragging about his TV appearances, bringing him information, perhaps even this information that is confidential financial information about Michael Cohen. One of the big thing, though, this headline is Russia, 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 this Russia company, which actually has a U.S. company, which gave him some money. You have to think, if this is the smoking gun of collusion, why did Robert Mueller's investigators farm this case out to the attorneys at the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York? I mean, this would seem to be in the heart of the Russia investigation, and yet Mueller gave it to somebody else.
Well, and what the company is saying is, not only did this oligarch have no personal involvement in controlling this company, this is an American-led and American-run company I think it's one of many investments this billionaire has.
Right.
I mean, people have investments all over the world. But it's like if you order a White Russian in a restaurant, if you ever took a Russian class, you're part of the Russian collusion. I think it hurts their case. I think it's really short-sighted for the media to take almost everything this guy says as gospel, and I think they're embarrassing themselves almost every night on this.
And to Byron's point, Novartis, one of the companies that was involved, released a statement saying that they were interviewed by the FBI in November. So clearly, this has been an issue for the people that have more information than we do for a long time. Mueller made the referral to the Southern District of New York. If it had anything to do with Russian collusion, it would have been held. So, it might be news to us because someone decided to leak a suspicious activity report, but it's not news to the investigators, and they haven't apparently thought it was part of this collusion case.
We're going to get to how he got these documents. I mean, he has an individual's banking records. Where did he get those? How did he get those? Okay, if they didn't come out of the Mueller investigation, they could have come out of some other compliance officers' files. People are leaking stuff left and right here. John Dean of Watergate fame was on CNN today, said this won't hurt Avenatti's credibility at all. Let's watch.
It could have come from a bank employee. It could have come from a Treasury Department employee. I think what has happened is probably going to be an innocent error on his part if it's the wrong Michael Cohen. I don't think it's going to affect his overall credibility, though, because he's got pretty solid documentation for everything he's been doing so far.
What, Byron?
Well, the key issue here is apparently he does have some, actual information from Cohen's bank records. There are real questions about how he got them, but it also does appear to show some sort of Michael Cohen pay-for-play operation in which these large corporations, Novartis, AT&T, and others, paid him tons of money, like $100,000 a month.
That's never happened in American politics.
Exactly.
Where a pal of a president actually gets money for access. I mean, it could be sleazy, but it's not illegal unless there was a quid pro quo.
And people have gotten into trouble for it.
Tony Rezko,
the president's brother back in the Jimmy Carter years.
Rezko, Obama's pal. Obama said, I don't really know him all that well, but turns out they had a
That's exactly right. So
prior relationship.
This is the kind of thing that it's legitimate for law enforcement to be investigating. But what about the attorney for the porn star actress who's trying to sue the president? No.
I mean, this is fairly typical Washington. It's a little swampy, but I mean, essentially, these big companies, they need access. Everyone was in a panic in Washington when Trump won because their usual lines of access were cut off. And so I think a lot of these companies, crossed Tony Podesta off their check and said, who do we need to write this to?
But what the fact that this guy is smearing the wrong Michael Cohen's? Like, he's throwing this all at the feet of Michael Cohen, Trump's personal attorney, and there are other Michael Cohens. I mean, I don't know. That's like a basic first-year law student wouldn't allow that mistake to happen. I mean, you'd get fired as an associate at the firm I used to work for if you made that mistake. And this guy is trotting himself all over television, bragging. We got to play the soundbite because Byron raised it. This is just so funny. He was bragging about his media strategy. This is fun to watch. Let's do it.
I have to tell you this. I'm going to touch on this, okay? There's been a lot of criticism lately about, not a lot, there's been some criticism about how our media strategy and how often I'm on CNN and how often I've been on your show and other networks, et cetera, okay? It's all a bunch of nonsense because here's the bottom line, Anderson. It's working, okay? It's working in spades. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that it's working is because we're so out front on this, people send us information. People want to help our cause.
Maybe the rules of evidence are eluding him.
And now the Treasury Department is investigating to see if any of their employees called the Michael Avenatti tip line and told them about this.
All right, gentlemen.